My dear student, colleagues, and all the viewers who are watching this program live from Facebook page, Physics Adda and School of Astrophysics and Astronomy and YouTube channel Pritam Kumar Das, I'd like to welcome you all to our International Physics webinar. So, good evening to all here in Bangladesh, and good afternoon to all those who are watching this program live from UK. So, hope you are well and safe from Corona pandemic. So we are trying to adjust with this new normal situation. We are facing a new type of pandemic since last 2020 corona pandemic. So we cannot continue our normal academic program due to the corona pandemic. So we have to start online program. I think you have already come to know that the Department of Physics, Pabna University of Science and Technology, has started its online program, including International Physics Webinar, and we have successfully completed our 152nd International Physics Webinar, including two Nobel laureate speakers. Today, we would like to welcome you all to a joint session between the Department of Physics, Pabna University of Science and Technology, and Department of Philosophy of Physics, University of Bucharest, Romania, Europe, in physics philosophy. And we have with us here today Dr. Gabriel Vaccaru, Professor Philosophy of Physics, University of Bucharest, Romania. And he has already connected with us. So I'd like to welcome our speaker, sir. Uh, Good afternoon and good evening here. So thanks for accepting our invitation. So for those who are new, I'd like to inform you all that we have divided our webinar into three parts. First of all, I would like to introduce our speaker with all of you, and then our speaker will deliver his speech, and at the end we have a discussion session. In that time, anybody can join with us, and you can also ask question by commenting. I think you have already come to know the title of this today's International Physics Webinar. The title is the Ancient Physics Rewritten Within a New Paradigm of Thinking, the Epistemologically Defined Worlds. And our speaker is Dr. Gabriel Vaccaru, Professor Philosophy of Physics, University of Bucharest, Romania, Europe. So we can see his educational background. So you can see he completed his PhD degree from University of New South Wales, Australia, and other degree, master's degree from MA degree from University of Bucharest, and bachelor same university. And this is academic employment record. So this is a research interest, general field of interest, philosophy of cognitive science, philosophy of physics, philosophy of mind, Kant's special topics of interest, the relationship between the mind and brain in cognitive science, the mind-body problem, localization, the binding problem, the spatial perception, localization in cognitive neuroscience, representation in cognitive science, philosophy of mind, emergence, super variance and reduction problem, and computationalism, connectionism, and dynamical system approaches in cognitive science, etc. So we can see his research gate ID is 7.79, and this is his Google Scholar ID. So thanks for all of your patience. Now it's time to go to our speaker. You can start your session. It's your time. And thanks again for accepting the invitation.
Thank you very much, Pritam, for your invitation. I will start to present the title of my presentation. The entire physics has to be rewritten in this new paradigm of thinking, epistemologically different worlds. This new paradigm of thinking is against the old framework, the universe, the world. I will indicate that the universe, the world does not exist, and I replace it, universe, the world, with epistemologically different worlds. I will make the application of my paradigm to quantum mechanics in this hour. I applied. I start with Einstein words. Einstein said quantum mechanics, I quoted Einstein words, quantum mechanics is certainly imposing, but an inner voice tells me that it is not yet the real thing. The theory says a lot, but does not really bring us closer to the secret of the old one being God. At any rate, I am convinced that he is not playing at dice. Einstein to Max Born. And the second quotation is, as Einstein realized, when the foundation of science becomes problematic, the man of science becomes a philosopher. So Einstein said this. So I want to show that even if I'm not working in physics, I'm working in philosophy, and my main preoccupation is cognitive neuroscience, but the second preoccupation is physics. And I discovered this new paradigm of thinking, epistemology of worlds, I discovered working on the mind-body problem. And immediately I applied to quantum mechanics, mysteries, and I worked my articles from 2002 and 2005, 2006, and so on. I have a PhD at the University of New South Wales in Australia, and it is posted by the staff of university in 2007, and you can find all my main idea there. And later I published a book at Springer in 2015, and I have other books and articles. My first 5 books are free at my webpage. All are in English. And I started presenting the epistemology of different worlds paradigm. I replaced it, as I said, I replaced the world, the universe, with epistemology of different worlds. I indicated that the universe, the world, as you wish to call, doesn't exist. So I applied this new paradigm to quantum mechanics, Einstein's special and theory relativity, relation between these theories, general relativity and quantum mechanics. I applied to cognitive science, to my main theories like computational correction and dynamic listening approach. I indicated that cognitive neuroscience is a pseudoscience, and I came with a new definition to life. I will present very shortly the epistemology of different worlds perspective, and then application to quantum mechanics. As I said, I replace all great theories from physics, cognitive neuroscience, and philosophy with new approaches under this umbrella, the epistemology of different worlds perspective. So I believe that physicists need to change their vocabulary. There are many physicists from the entire world who plagiarize my ideas. Being nobody, physicists from US or from Germany could not accept nobody change everything in physics, and they prefer to ignore my work or to plagiarize my work. It is like somebody composing an unbelievably similar symphony to Fifth Symphony composed by Beethoven, and claiming that he has never listened Fifth Symphony. How much stupid has a person to be in order to accept this statement? At the beginning, I was working on mind-body problem. I discovered the existence of epistemology of different worlds, and in parallel, I applied to quantum mechanics and other problems from physics. I solved the entanglement problem, non-locality problems, and other most important problems from quantum mechanics. I want to emphasize at the beginning that epistemology of different worlds is a completely different theory than Bohr complementarity, Dirac waves particle duality, or Everett many worlds. In my book from 2020 and the other one from 2019, I indicated the difference between Everett's many worlds and my approach. The main difference is given by the fact that Bohr complementarity, Dirac wave particle duality, and Everett's many worlds are constructed within the unicorn world. I call the universe, I call unicorn world. So when in my presentation, when you hear unicorn world, I refer to universe. They make a mixture of these epistemology different worlds in their theory. So it is not the same thing between my theory and their theory. So after I solved the mind-body problem, I solved some mysteries from quantum mechanics. I work on the relationship between Einstein general relativity that refers to macro epistemological, and quantum mechanics that refers to two epistemological different worlds, the micro epistemological world and the field epistemological different worlds. These are the fields that belong to quantum mechanics. Until me, the physicists believe that the macro objects do not really exist. It was a kind of reductionist to many people to microparticles. However, there was an ontological problem between the existence of microparticle and the electromagnetic fields. There were some physicists, not too many, who reduced everything to electromagnetic field, like Penrose. And the philosophers were talking about thing in itself. I rejected, with my epistemological different world, I rejected both any kind of reductionism and any kind of emergence or supervenience. These are concepts constructed within the unicorn world. In fact, I rejected all these concepts and I replaced it with epistemological different worlds. In this framework, I indicate that space-time or space and time cannot have any ontology. Otherwise, there will be strong ontological contradictions. I'm not the only one who indicated space-time cannot have an ontology, but I indicated space-time cannot have any ontology in a new paradigm of thinking. So I came with a new explication, a new argument why this space-time cannot exist. Because firstly, I indicated space-time cannot exist in 2016 in my book. In 2017, I wrote in a book, I rewrote both Einstein relativity, special and general, using only motions and rejecting the ontology of space-time. Einstein knew that time did not exist, but he didn't deny the existence of space. Anyway, nobody inquired about Einstein extension from three-dimension space, adding another dimension, the time dimension, and creating a four-dimension space-time. Nobody inquired about the ontology of these extensions. How Einstein was possible to extend 3 dimensions to 4 dimensions? How was possible ontologically? And I discovered that in fact it was a wrong extension because space and time do not exist. In another book, 2010, I showed that hyperspace or superstring theory cannot exist. We cannot talk about 4 dimensions. How to talk about 10, 11, 12, 26 dimensions? It's totally absurd. And don't forget Einstein's slogan about mathematics and reality. As far as the laws of mathematics refer to reality, they are not certain. As far as they are certain, they do not refer to reality. In 1921, Einstein. A new interpretation of dark matter and dark energy with epistemology different worlds. I came with a new interpretation. However, in my last book published in December last year, I have another new interpretation of dark matter without introducing a new epistemological different world. Using only the epistemological different worlds that we know, micro, macro, field, electromagnetic waves, and the mind, I can explain why dark energy exists, not dark matter, dark energy. So these are my general presentation. In the second part, I present very shortly epistemology different perspective. I refer only to non-living entities. My theory is applied to living entities, human beings and others, and non-living entities. I present non-living entities, the part of physics. So the existence of an entity exists in its epistemological world only because of its interaction with other non-living entities. So after the Big Bang, I indicated in my books that it wasn't a Big Bang. It were many Big Bangs, not only one. And using many Big Bangs at the same time, I avoid good inflation. So I don't need good inflation because there were many Big Bangs at the same time. So I don't need inflation. So it was quantum plasma. Then when the quantum plasma became less hot, appeared the electromagnetic fields. After electromagnetic appears and the electromagnetic waves interacted, appears microparticles in an epistemology different worlds. And the microparticle accumulated in a huge amalgam of microparticles and created the corresponding macroparticles like planets. and on a planet appeared life. So we have here different epistemological different worlds: the field epistemological world, the micro epistemological world, and the macro epistemological, and the mind epistemological world. So these are epistemological different worlds. One world does not exist for all the other worlds. So the principle for non-living entities, very shortly: epistemological interaction constitute epistemological different object. Epistemological different objects determine epistemological different interaction. Any object exists only at surface due to the interaction that constitute. Any object exists in a single epistemological world and interact only with the object from that epistemological world. Any epistemological world appear from and disappear in nothing, which has no ontology. Any epistemological world is therefore all epistemological different worlds share the same objective reality, and one epistemological world that does not exist for any epistemological different world. This is a very important principle. The existence of a physical object, it is not in a spatial temporal framework, it is in its epistemological world. So I said that the planets constitute macro epistemological world, the microparticle constitutes the micro epistemological world, waves constitute the wave or field epistemological world. But I want to emphasize that these worlds, macro, micro, and field or wave epistemological world, these worlds, this epistemological world does not exist. What exists are the entities, and all these entities, macro entities or microparticles, we call them the macro worlds, micro epistemological or micro epistemological. The world does not exist in itself. What exists are these entities that represent these epistemological worlds. Composition, emergence, supervenience, identity, all these are pseudo notions. So the physicists and people working in cognitive neuroscience and philosophy have to reject all these notions. Now I start to talk about the epistemology different worlds applied to quantum mechanics. The physicists working in quantum mechanics consider that before we measure, in front of us is neither electromagnetic wave nor particle. Using a particular instrument, the physicists were able to see the microparticle. Changing the instrument, they were able to see an electromagnetic wave. The problem was that the physicists have been working within the unicorn world, the universe. They could not predict that before our measurement, in front of us, there are both entities, the wave and the microparticle. Because being in a single world, there was a contradiction to have in front of you an electromagnetic wave and microparticle. In fact, they emphasized the role of observer, and Bohr and other people, Copenhagen interpretation and others have said that we have to include the measurement apparatus in the definition of quantum entities. This is from Copenhagen interpretation mainly. Anyway, in order, let's see, so yes, here I am. In order to observe indirectly through correspondence the entities in a particular epistemological world, we need certain condition of observation. Observation is a unidirectional process. Since some of the entities we observe indirectly through correspondence are not in the same macro as it is the brain. Anyway, it is the brain and the body belongs to macro epistemological world, which is an epistemologically different world than our mind. Each mind is an epistemological world. If we use an electronic microscope, that is a macro object, the researcher can observe indirectly through correspondence an electron which belongs to the micro. The electron does not interact either with the brain or with the mind. No, the electron interact with an amalgam of microparticle which correspond to our brain body. So there was a confusion to put everything in the same world, micro, macro, and the mind. No, I came with epistemological worlds, and I indicated for the first time in the history of human thinking that universe does not exist, and we cannot put in the universe everything. In fact, there are epistemological different worlds. The main rule: one world does not exist for any epistemological different world. So this is the main rule, and nobody came with this rule before me. And this is the most important, and this created this new paradigm of thinking. As I said, two entities can interact if they belong to the same epistemological world. With the exception of the human organism, no entity can change its condition of interaction or observation. So we observe all other entities indirectly through correspondence, because it is our mind which observe this table in front of you. In front of you, you observe a table. It's not your eyes which observes this table. It's your mind which observe this table. So an entity does not exist for any epistemological worlds. There are correspondences between entities, processes which belong to epistemological worlds, but these correspondences do not have ontological status. Notion like causality, identity, which refer to entities which belong to epistemological worlds, are quite wrong concepts, empty notion. So we have to use correlation or better correspondence, not only in cognitive neuroscience, but also in physics and biology. So now we move to quantum mechanics, particles versus fields or waves, electromagnetic waves. There was a long time ago, 200-300 years ago, Newton was atomistic. The light is made by microparticles. Huygens, the light is wave. Leibniz also considered that it's an electromagnetic wave. The problem between atomism and electromagnetic waves was that these theories use incompatible concepts. So you cannot put together these concepts of atoms and electromagnetic waves. The most famous experiment in quantum mechanics is this Young double slit experiment in 1801. Feynman, the great physicist, said about Young double slit experiment, said that this represents quantum mechanics. The question was, light is wave or microparticle? Some consider that is particle, some consider that it's wave. But because of this experiment, Young interference experiment, many people believe that is a wave. There were some interference effects indicating the presence of overlapping waves. So light is a wave, subject to the superposition principle, constructive and destructive interferences of light. So wave, Young, Hooke, Huygens, Euler, they supported wave, light is electromagnetic wave. Others like Newton consider that light is a microparticle. Also, we have not to forget that Einstein proved with his photoelectric effect that light is made by microparticles. So in our days, we have can make a double slit experiment with new apparatus. We can send a microparticle toward this two slits screen in front of us, and after these two screens there is a measurement apparatus. And if we send a particle, the apparatus measure an electromagnetic wave. And say, oh, wait a moment, I said microparticle, why your apparatus measure electromagnetic waves? And moreover, the problem is that if I can send one after the other microparticles, each microparticle enter in one or the other slit. It is only the electromagnetic waves which passes through the both slits. And some physicists, including Feynman, they consider that the microparticle passes through both slits in order to explain this paradox. It is wrong because there were epistemological different worlds. So in one world, it is the microparticle which passes through one slit, not both. In other epistemological different world, there are there is an electromagnetic wave which passes through both slits. So with using my epistemological words, I explain very clear and very shortly, I explain this Young double slit experiment. I repeat, Feynman said, this represents quantum mechanics. Now I want to move to the history, a very short history of quantum mechanics. Maxwell, unified electricity, magnetism, and optics, light as propagating wave of electric and magnetic fields. He predicted the existence of electromagnetic radiation, and he predicted the speed of light is c. Maxwell said, we have strong reason to conclude that light itself, including radiant heat and other radiation, if any, is an electromagnetic disturbance in the form of waves propagated through the electromagnetic field according to the electromagnetic waves. This is from Britannica. And the second from Maxwell, it's very important for me that I want to talk about this. The second quotation, electromagnetic waves do not represent physical displacements that propagate through a medium like mechanical sound and the water wave. Instead, they describe propagating, oscillating in the strengths of electric and magnetic fields. Oh, wait a moment, I have to return. Come on. So, what is very important here is that Maxwell told us that the electromagnetic waves are propagating oscillation in the strength of electric and magnetic fields. This is very important for me. This means that it is just electromagnetic waves are a manifestation of electromagnetic field. And so waves are just propagating oscillation in electromagnetic field. But the problem is that, as physicists considered a long time ago, and it is available, this statement today, electromagnetic field is present everywhere after the Big Bang, after those many Big Bangs. But wait a moment. If electromagnetic waves is present everywhere in this universe which does not exist, it means that we cannot put together with space-time because it's an ontological contradiction. So we have to exclude space-time from our equation. Anyway, from epistemology different worlds, when it is from my approach, epistemology different worlds, I put here epistemology different worlds and 2 points and my interpretation. So how do we interpret? How I interpret Maxwell equation? Referring to the first equation, we have to consider that the electric charge, a microparticle, does not generate an electric field, since these entities, the electric charge and the electric field, belongs to epistemology different worlds. It's not about a causality between a microparticle and electromagnetic field. It is about the coiled up rapid electromagnetic waves which correspond with a microparticle, and it is this coiled up rapid electromagnetic wave which generates electromagnetic fields. It is not a microparticle which generates electromagnetic fields. The third law, magnetic field and electric field are two faces of the same phenomenon which belongs to the epistemology different worlds, then the microepistemology different worlds. The fourth law, if the electric charges that belongs to micro epistemological world generates the electric field which generates the magnetic fields, and this belongs to field epistemological world, which generates the electric field and so on. This process continues even if the electric charge disappears. Why? Our explanation is there are epistemological different ones. Microparticles are in a micro epistemological world. Electromagnetic waves belong to field epistemological world. So if the electromagnetic field is present everywhere in the universe, we have to reject the idea that space and time has an ontology. Space-time cannot have any ontology. It doesn't matter if we call space, we call time, we call space-time as Einstein. There is no ontology for these entities. Quantum mechanics, very short summary, and then I talk more details. Newton, atomic physics. Light is particles. Huygens, it's an electromagnetic waves. I said about Young and Maxwell equation. Schrödinger, the inventor of wave equation, believes it describes the electrons. Born introduced probability, and I will talk about this probability because he was working within the unicorn world, and this was the reason that he needed to did this probability interpretations. The Bruegel duality, he associates to any particle, he associates an electromagnetic wave, but he didn't explain what does mean associations. He was working within the unicorn world. Pauli, the wave function as probability amplitude for position or momentum of particle. he followed the Heisenberg uncertainty relation. I will talk about this later. And Bohm came with the both electron and wave exist, but where they all exist? In the universe. And it was ontological contradiction. And I will talk about Bell, which his global wave function regarding S real. Anyway, the main problem in quantum mechanics was entanglement and non-locality. I will talk about this. I will explain much better than everybody explained until me these mysteries. Anyway, I continue. After the Young experiment, it was Michelson and Morley experiment using their interferometer to measure the speed of light. And the experiment compared the speed of light in perpendicular directions in an attempt to detect the relative motions of matter through the stationary luminous ether. The result was negative, so they found no significant difference between the speed of light in the direction of movement through the presumed ether and the speed at the right angles. So Einstein used these results from Michelson and Morley experiment. He used it to create special relativity with no ether. Of course, from epistemological worlds, the ether cannot exist. Ether, it was like a space-time, and space-time cannot exist. Neither ether cannot exist because everywhere is present. It is electromagnetic field, and it would be a contradiction between ether and electromagnetic field, or space-time and electromagnetic field. So we have to reject ether and space-time. Einstein didn't reject space-time, so after I indicated that space-time cannot exist in my book 2016, I needed in 1 year later, I needed to rewrite both spatial and general relativity without space-time, using only motion. Anyway, we return to our history. In 1888, Hertz came with the existence of electromagnetic waves. That means radio waves. Faraday, he indicated electromagnetic inductions, changing magnetic flux induce an electric current. He visualized electric charge as producing fields in space and transmit electric and magnetic forces to other distance charges. Changing magnetic fields produce electric fields and vice versa. I want to emphasize that we cannot relate microparticle with electromagnetic waves or electromagnetic fields. They belong to epistemological different worlds, and Hertz and all the others made the confusion, putting together all this, putting in the same world, unicorn world. Also, the electric charges in motion generate the magnetic field. The magnetic force acts on the electric charges which move inside that magnetic field. This is from a book of somebody working in physics, pressure, in our days. Essentially, this is that according to Ampere, the electric field generates the magnetic fields, which generate the electric field, and so on. Also, Faraday's law indicated that the variable magnetic fields generate the variable electric fields, pressure. We have to explain this phenomenon within the epistemological world. The magnetic field and the electric fields are two phases of the same phenomenon, which belong to the field epistemological world. And this field epistemological world correspond with the micro epistemological world. So there are epistemological worlds which one does not exist for the other. So in one there are electromagnetic waves which represent field, electromagnetic field, and in the other epistemological world there are microparticles, and one does not exist for the other. A physicist believes that the magnetic field, for instance, acts on the trajectory of the electron charges, microparticle, in motion through the magnetic forces. This is from pressure. From our viewpoint, from my viewpoint, the field and the particle is in the epistemological world. Therefore, the magnetic fields acts not on the particle, which does not exist in that field epistemological world, but on the part which is curved of the electromagnetic fields, which represent for us the particle. But there are epistemological worlds. The microparticle does not exist for the electromagnetic field, so the electromagnetic field cannot act directly to the microparticle because they belong to epistemological worlds. At the end of the 19th century, physicists were, we return to the history, at the end of the 19th century, physicists were unable to explain why do observe spectrum of black body radiation? It was Max Planck who, wait a moment, when an object is heated, it emits radiation consisting of electromagnetic waves, EDEST, light with broad range of frequency. In 19, Planck discovered, according to Planck made a discovery, according to which an entity, it was called oscillator because the atoms were not discovered in that period, absorbs and emits energy, not in a continuous, but in a discontinuously way, in small indivisible units. And it was his formula, and Planck called energy quanta. The relationship between, given by Planck's radiation law, it is increasing temperature, the total radiated energy increases, and the peak of the emitted spectrum shift to shorter waves. This resolved the problem of ultraviolet catastrophe in classical mechanics. And it was Planck, it was the first great physicist working in quantum mechanics. But here, even for explaining his radiation, there are epistemological different ones. So the ejection of the electrons by light is possible because the energy quanta penetrate the surface layer of the metal of the target electrode. Their energy is transferred, at least in part, into kinetic energy of the electron, and some are ejected. This is from McCoy and Zarat book. From our viewpoint, from my viewpoint, the ejection of electron is possible because of their interaction with photon. The energy quanta penetrate the surface layer of metal of the target electrode is a statement constructed within the unicorn world by the McCoy, Envoy, and Zarate. In fact, energy quanta is, in reality, the electromagnetic waves. Surface layer of the metal electrode is a macro entity. The energy that is transferred is the electromagnetic field, and this is transformed into the kinetic energy. In fact, there is a correspondence between electrons and electromagnetic waves. These microparticles are ejected from where? Not from a macro object. They are ejected from a huge amalgam of microparticle, which correspond with a macroscopic electrode. So we have three epistemological different worlds here: microparticles, waves, and macro objects. So we have to pay attention when we want to explain these processes. We have to investigate the very important details of quantum mechanics. The energy takes only discrete values, not continuous values. In order to explain the black body radiation, Planck, one of the fathers of quantum mechanics, quantified the quantum energy. EDEST, the energy can take only discrete values, pressure. If Planck quantified the quantum energy of the black body radiation, Einstein quantifies the light. Electromagnetic waves of light is formed from discrete packets of energy, photons. Somebody else called photons, not Einstein. From our viewpoint, we have only the correspondence between a part of that enfolded curved electromagnetic waves and the microparticle. So there are epistemological worlds. Interesting. Pressure said that there is necessary at least 10 photons to reach retina of the eye in order this information to be manipulated by the brain. The emission or the absorption of light takes place through transitions between the levels of energy of atoms. In these processes, the photons are emitted. This is the quotation. I ask, what does light mean here? It has to be an electromagnetic wave, of course, since the photons appears later. Therefore, this sentence is in this sentence we can see a mixture of epistemological worlds. Moreover, the level of energy of atoms means exactly different values in different places of the which correspond to parts of the electromagnetic field. So we have to introduce this new vocabulary. For us, in our macroscopic world, wait a moment to see if I move correctly. Yes. For us, in our macroscopic world, the levels of energy seems to be continuous and not discrete values. Therefore, in classical physics, the energy of a body will evolve continuously. In reality, however, the evolution takes place through jumps from one level to another. Because the difference between discrete levels of energy is very little, we do not perceive evolution in jumps. This is a quotation from Pressure. From my perspective, Pressure writes here about the macroscopic level and the microscopic level, but he forgot to introduce the wave level. So in fact, we have here 3 epistemological different worlds. So this paragraph has to be rewritten. The electromagnetic wave is continuously, it has no discrete values, and we have to recall that a microparticle, a discrete entity, corresponds to a wave continuous entity. And there are discrete values for an energy at quantum level only when we refer to different parts of the continuous field, which has different values, and when we refer to microparticle. So from the electromagnetic wave fields, there are 3 important features: intensity, wavelength, and frequency. So from the electromagnetic fields viewpoints, directness would be a wrong notion, exactly as for macroparticle, such discreteness is also a wrong notion, because we have epistemological different worlds. In one is the wave or the field, in the other is microparticle. So we have to pay attention when we write principles in physics. In 1905, Einstein wrote special relativity, postulated that the speed of light is the same in all reference frames. Thus, the measured speed of light is independent of the relative motion of the observer and the light surface. The hypothetical ether with its preferred reference frame is rejected. Of course, from our viewpoint, we can explain much better why light has the speed of light is the same in all reference frames. It is the same in all reference frames because the light belongs to an epistemological different worlds than the other reference frames. So this is the reason is the same. Following Max Planck quantization of light, black body radiation, Einstein interpreted Planck's quanta to be photons, particle of light. Energy of a photon is proportional to its frequency. The momentum of a photon is inversely proportional with its wavelength and proportionally with its wave number. We have that formula with Planck's constant, experimentally verified by Millikan in 1916. We explain all these experiments from our epistemological worlds perspective. In some cases, these references are just epistemological worlds. So as I said, electromagnetic waves, microparticle, macro observer, macro instruments, and the body of the physicist, who is the observer, all belongs to epistemological worlds. So again, this is the reason that the speed of light of electromagnetic waves and the speed of corresponding photons are always c, but the waves and the photons belongs to epistemological different worlds. So we have to rewrite all the principles of and theories and approaches constructed in physics in the last 100 years, 200 years. There are various approaches to the quantum measurements problem, but let's talk about very few words about Copenhagen interpretation with Bohr-Leader, many worlds approach. We mention only many worlds approach. I don't have time. Everett and Deutsch, Bohm approach, Girard de Rimini, Weber, and there are see in Putnam the presentation. But let's take Copenhagen school. Particles or waves. We have using interferometer. We have interference patterns. It is determined by the nature of observation how it is realized. So Bohr introduces complementarity. The problem is that some people can tell me that look, Bohr's complementarity is quite similar with your epistemological ones. No, Bohr's complementarity is constructed within the unicorn world. He had no idea that the universe doesn't exist, and he had no idea that we cannot put together everything in the same framework. He was still working even with his complementary within the same wrong framework. He related this complementarity principle with the measurement apparatus, and he considered even that we have to define an entity. In the definition of an entity, quantum entity, we have to include even the measurement apparatus, because we have an apparatus for electromagnetic waves and we have another apparatus for microparticle. So we have to include the in definition of wave or microparticle the apparatus that we use. But this is a kind of very subjective viewpoint referring to entities which belong to epistemological different worlds, to quantum mechanics, and it is everything constructed within the same framework, the world, the universe. Earth, for instance, introduces creation's discovery view. Measurement in general do change the state of the entity under consideration. In this way, the view incorporates two aspects: an aspect of discovery, referring to the properties that the entity already had before our measurement. This aspect is independent of the measurement being made, and an aspect of creation, referring to the new properties that are created in the act of measurement. These aspects depend on the measurement apparatus. This is Earth's viewpoint, and I can interpret this viewpoint telling him that no, we don't create new properties to electrons or to electromagnetic waves. No, it's just we changing the apparatus, we move from one epistemological to the other. And those entities existed there before we use it, with those properties existed before we use it, our apparatus. Broglie and in 26 and Bohm in 54 interpretation, the particle has the properties of a small projectile, but it is accompanied by a wave, which is responsible for the interference pattern. Incorporates the observed quantum phenomena and attempts to change as little as possible at the level of the underlying reality, where these quantum entities exist and interact. This reality is the ordinary three-dimensional Euclidean space. The quantum entity is considered to be a wave and a particle existing, moving and changing in this three-dimensional space, Euclidean space. The quantum probabilities appear in the Broglie-Bohm picture as ordinary classical probabilities resulting from a lack of knowledge about where this point particle associated with the quantum entity is, exactly as the probabilities of a classical statistical theory, due to the lack of knowledge about the microstates of atoms and molecules of the substance considered. The Broglie-Bohm picture is thus a hidden variable theory. The variable describing the state of the point particle are the hidden variables, and the lack of knowledge about this hidden variable is the origin of the probability. We'll talk just the next page about the probability. What I want to say is that Broglie and Bohm and all the others using hidden variable theory, it's just they are quite right. It is indeed a hidden variable theory. That means it's a new theory. It's not only just hidden variables there. It's in fact a new framework, my framework, which replaces the universe in which everybody has been working. So this hidden variables, in fact, it's not about a theory, it's about a new framework. So we have to change the framework of thinking. De Broglie, wait a moment, De Broglie. He elaborated his theory, electron waves, light as electromagnetic waves, and microparticles, photons. So he has a kind of wave-particle duality, which tends to Bohr complementarity, because the Broglie duality is very close to Bohr complementarity. And I can ask the Broglie, wait a moment, your duality is it's exactly the Bohr complementary. But what he brings new that this feature is a common to light and matter. It's not only for light, it's for matter. So any microparticle has to be associated with an electromagnetic wave. My problem is that what does mean associate? I can ask De Broglie, what does mean your duality? Where is this duality in the universe? So they cannot explain association between a wave and a microparticle, because they work in the universe and they cannot explain. They just presuppose science. It's a kind of Bohr complementarity, working in the wrong framework. So in the end, he cannot explain association between a wave and a microparticle. He cannot explain. Because there are epistemological different worlds, and it's not association between wave and microparticle, it is correspondence. But correspondence has no ontological status. Why? Because it is a correspondence between a particle and a wave, and the particle and the wave belongs to epistemological different worlds. So when you use associated wave, it has no meaning. with his pilot waves, give the particle in motions. Come on, it's not the pilot which gives guide the particle, because the one doesn't exist for the other. In fact, there are just a correspondence between wave and microparticle. So this is a completely new explanation about the Broglie association. Anyway, let's return to yes, let's return. So we have to replace associated with correspondence, and correspondence require epistemological different words. Later, in the late 1920s and 30s, foundation of quantum mechanics theory of light and its interaction with matter were developed in the late 20s and 30s by Dirac, Heisenberg, Jordan, Pauli, and others. But I emphasize, all have been working, all were working within the unicorn world. Max Born, for instance, let's take Max Born. He introduced probability. We need a statistical interpretation of the wave function in relation with the particle. The wave function provides the mean for calculating the probability of finding a particle at any point in space. The probability density of finding a particle at a given point, when measured, is proportional to the square of the magnitude of the particle's wave function at that point. When a measurement is made to detect a particle, it always appears as point-like, and its position immediately after the measurement is well defined. But before a measurement is made, or between successive measurement, the particle position is not well defined. Instead, the state of particle is specified by its evolving wave functions. So it appears from my viewpoint, my epistemological perspective appears, wait a moment, what Born wanted to say. Before measurement, the particle has no position. No, Born, you are wrong. Before measurement, the particle position is well defined. We don't know its position. And this position, particle, has a relationship, a correspondence with the wave function. And this is all. But it is not like something like we don't know what is there and we have to use probability. No, probability was used just because they didn't have, it's a kind of hidden variables theory, probability. But they transform, many physicists transform probability statistical apparatus in ontology. They consider at quantum level we have statistical ontology, and it was completely wrong. So we have to exclude, with my epistemological words, I indicate that we have to exclude probability from ontology. We can use probability only like a we don't know all the details, but this is we don't know that is an epistemological principle and not an ontological, as some physicists believe. I want to present very shortly three theories of quantum mechanics: Heisenberg matrix mechanics and his uncertainty indeterminacy principle. The position and velocity of an object cannot be on a particle, cannot be measured exactly at the same time, even in theory. Heisenberg indicated his uncertain principle for position of momentous, P equal mv, no commutative variables at a particle. We cannot measure exactly simultaneously these parameters. From my view, I don't want to offer all the details that are written there, but from my viewpoint, it's very simple. We have a correspondence between particle and electromagnetic waves. They belong, these entities belong to epistemological different worlds. So when we want to measure the position of a particle, that particle, the speed of that particle will increase, will become greater and greater, and we cannot detect the speed. So and vice versa with the position. So less position, better speed, and it is just an epistemological principle, this uncertainty principle. Many people believe that this is reality of quantum mechanics. And I came with my epistemological world and I indicated no, that this is just epistemological framework. if we want to see clearly the position of electron, we need to increase the intensity of light. Therefore, it will be more interaction between the electron and more photons. We will see better the position of microparticle, but because of those interactions, we'll measure less its momentum, speed. So less speed, better position, and the other one. This measurement does not employ, as many physicists and philosophers believe, the breakdown of Laplace principle of determinism in the universe. No. There are, using the correspondence of epistemic different entities which belong to epistemic different worlds, just approximations. Indirect correspondence measurement, no more or less. Obviously, we cannot use our instrument of measurement, but it does not mean that ontologically the quantum world is uncertain. No. I return to Einstein, who was quite right. I can't believe that God plays dice. That God doesn't exist. I have a paper at my webpage, but I want to tell from epistemology from worlds, there are nobody plays dice. So uncertain principle is just an epistemological principle, but not an ontological one, as many people believe. This is what I emphasize with this. There is a quantum superposition which evolved following Schrödinger equation. If the wave structure or the wave probability is involved, then the particle is also involved. But when you talk about wave and microparticle in the same equations, hey, come on, it's a mixture of epistemological worlds. And they didn't know that it's a mixture. And they believe that this is the ontology of quantum mechanics. No, measurement the location of an electron depends on the magnitude of its functions, but this dependency is just correspondence, is not ontological, because you cannot put together in the same world the particle and the epistemological world, as they thought until me. The uncertainty principle is just an epistemological principle, not an ontological one. It is not a surprise. Working within the unicorn world, the universe, the majority of physics transformed this epistemological principle in ontological principle. So it was a wrong transformation. I move to the second interpretation, Schrödinger wave equation, evolution over time of the wave functions in 26. And the third one, Morris-Dirac transformations theory. And later von Neumann, who rediscovered Dirac in 32. Based on the non-commutative quantities, Dirac constructed transformations theory in which Heisenberg and Schrödinger interpretation were special cases of his own more general formulation. But he emphasized that all these interpretations are equivalent. Dirac, he said, by consistently applying quantum mechanics to Maxwell electromagnetic theory, I constructed the first known specimen of a quantum field theory. Quantum field theory. Using both Faraday notions of continuous field and discrete entities, microparticle, Dirac interpreted light as wave or particle. Dirac was well understood for Dirac's was well understood formalism, which, if interrogated in a particle like wave gave particle behavior, and it interrogated in a wave like wave gave wave behavior, we find a particle or we find wave. Wait a moment. Yes, we find, but to find a particle or to find a wave, we need epistemology, we need different instrument of observation. So anyway, if we use a particle instrument of observation, we observe a wave. If we use another instrument of observation, we observe a particle. But they, working in the unicorn world, some physicists, including Bohr, believe that there was a kind of noumena, and we observe just phenomena given by the instrument. No, in fact, the particle and the wave both exist, are not only just phenomena, they can really exist, they have an ontology, but in epistemological different worlds. Bohr introduced probability, a superposition of quantum states, was quite accepted, this probability. They believe that everything is probability in quantum mechanics, ontology. They ontologize probability. Probability become receive an ontological field, and it was completely wrong from my viewpoint. Schrödinger introduced, because of this, Schrödinger introduced cat experiment, and Einstein, Podolsky, and Rosen, starting with the cat experiment, created their paradox related to separateness and non-locality. Because of the probability of radioactive source to decay 50% yes or 50% no, then cat is this was a cat experiment. Cat is before our experiment, our measurement. Cat is alive and dead before the radioactive decay to take place. Bohr, before we open the box, the cat is neither wholly alive nor wholly dead, but is a mixture of two states, the superposition of two-wave functions. This was what Born was claiming, and many people in physics believed in that moment, and later, after until our days, many people believe that before we open the box, there is both states, and when we open the box, we see one state, and the other state disappear, or the other state moves in another epistemological in another universe. But this is Everett Many-Wall's interpretation. But his universes are all in the same universe. So this Many-Wall's interpretation with his Everett walls, all these walls are in the same universe. So it's completely different than my epistemological walls. Schrödinger didn't accept probability interpretation of his wave functions. Until my theory appeared, many people have been working until this probability and Many-Wall's interpretation, but all are wrong, including Everett Many-Walls is completely wrong. The paradoxes appear because they have been working within the unicorn wall. For Bohr, our act of observation collapses the superposition of the two wave functions to a single one, making the cat definitely dead or alive, envoy. Of course, from my viewpoint is that superposition does not exist because one epistemological wall does not exist for the other. So before to open the box, there is no superposition as everybody believed until me. No, in fact, there are epistemological walls which one does not exist for the other. So they have to change completely their framework. In quantum mechanics, the notion of probability waves is very important. We will interpret the pilot wave of an electron as a probability wave for electron which give us the probability to find the electron in one place or the other. From my viewpoint, from my theory viewpoint, this probability was introduced just because the microparticle and the wave belong to epistemological walls. And the microparticle correspond to the entire electromagnetic wave. So even if it is the greatest probability to find the microparticle to be in a place which correspond to the node of the electromagnetic waves, anyway, this probability has to be understood as a pragmatic tool, but without any ontological commitment, as they believe. The probability wave indicates exactly the correspondence between electromagnetic wave and photon. Moreover, pressure the physicist indicates that the probability wave, electromagnetic wave, split in two when it passes through those two slits. We return to Young's experiment. But what does it happen with the photon? This was a big question in physics until I came with the solution. In fact, there are epistemological walls in explaining the Young experiment, that famous experiment. Feynman approaches. The photon passes through both slits. He came with this idea. Working within the unicorn world, he could introduce this absurd idea from my viewpoint. Feynman, a great physicist, anyway, a great physicist. But it was completely wrong, this presupposition. The photon passes through both slits. No, Feynman. The photon passes only from only through one slit. The problem is that in an epistemological world, the electromagnetic wave passes through both slits. In fact, the electromagnetic wave doesn't pass through slits because the slits doesn't exist for electromagnetic waves. The electromagnetic waves passes through two curved electromagnetic waves, which in our world, those curved electromagnetic waves represent those two slits, because the slit doesn't interact with the macro objects. So we have to rewrite even what does mean slits. Quantum mechanical description of light was not fully realized until 40s. Light and matter share the common central feature, a complementary relation between wave and particle that can be illustrated without resorting to the formalists of relativistic quantum mechanics. I want to emphasize that in the last year, because of my scandal with plagiarism, I sent 1,000 emails, 1,000 of addresses in the last years. Many physicists started to working in epistemological worlds without mentioning my name. But everybody, many people started to rewrite their theories with my epistemological worlds. And I don't want to give all the details about this, referring to duality wave particle, what is pressure saying this. what is written there. No, we have here epistemological different worlds and about measurement, and I don't want to read all these details because it's what I said until now. The correspondence between microparticle and the node of wave cannot be established perfectly. Therefore, probability is just a tool of our observation, but not something which has an ontological support, as many physicists believe. The wave pilot does not guide the movement of electrons, since particle does not exist for the wave and the wave does not exist for the particle. There is just a correspondence. So we can explain the guidance using correspondence which has no ontological status. So we have to rewrite this guidance. Why they use a probability wave until me? They were working within the unicorn world, and in reality a particle is associated with the entire electromagnetic wave. So you need probability to find the relationship between the microparticle and the node of the electromagnetic wave. I now want to introduce a few words about, these are the last words probably, about the non-locality of microparticle. A microparticle corresponds to the entire wave. So Maxwell equation for the photon, Schrödinger equation for the electron, which and it describes the evolution of the probability wave. From my viewpoint, Schrödinger equation mirrors correspondence between an electron and the electromagnetic wave. Electron, greater probability to be in place than in other, but it can be everywhere with less and less probability. Since the electron corresponds to the entire wave, an electron can be found in a point which corresponds with the electromagnetic wave, but it has greatest probability to be found in a point which corresponds with that node of electromagnetic waves. So this was it was necessary to introduce probability because of the correspondence between electron, microparticle, and wave, but this is just epistemologically, not ontologically, as they believed until I appeared with the electromagnetic waves. Quantum electromagnetic waves, quantum electrodynamics, Feynman, Schwinger, and Tomonaga with the Nobel Prizes. Interactions of electromagnetic radiation with charged particle, no, wrong, it's our epistemological words. And interaction of charged particle with one another, yes, it's correct. Maxwell equation, the electromagnetic fields described are quantized, and photons appear the excitation of those quantum fields. Yes, yes, the electrons, microparticles are excitation of those quantized fields, but both exist, the fields and the microparticle, in epistemological different worlds. So I don't want to give more details about all this because it's about epistemological different worlds, microparticle and the fields. This is what I explain everywhere, and I replace space-time with electromagnetic fields that is present everywhere in front of us, but it is not in our world of macro object where is our body. It's in epistemological different worlds, in field epistemological world, but it's present everywhere. And because of the presence of that field, we have to reject the existence of a space-time. Space-time doesn't exist. It is nothing which correspond between two planets. It is nothing, not space-time. Between two planets is nothing which correspond with the electromagnetic field, which belongs to an epistemological world. So we have to rewrite everything in quantum mechanics, everything in physics. I don't want to give all the details. There are Werther, I quoted the same ideas. Working in within the unicorn world. I don't want to read everything because it's the same problem, and it will be working within the unicorn world. If the field is present at every point in the entire universe at the same time, the particle has to be present somewhere. Here, for instance, we reach certain hyperontological contradictions. Since two entities process cannot be present in the same place at the same moment, the field or the wave cannot penetrate the walls of your house, since the walls and the wave belongs to epistemological worlds. So within the unicorn world, almost everybody, Rigol, Bohr, complementary, believes that a particle and a small part of a field occupy the same place at the same time. This is an ontological contradiction. So we need epistemological worlds, not the unicorn world, because of so it is the same thing everywhere. I want only to move at the end of my presentation. Entanglement between two particles in reality is a correspondence between a continuous wave, wait a moment, between a continuous wave with two Pix nodes and those microparticles. The entanglement cannot be explained within the micro epistemological world, where are those two microparticles. but it does not mean that we have here a dual aspect of the real nature, noumena, dual property, property dualism. No, we have epistemically different worlds. It's not duality because one doesn't exist for the other. So it's completely different framework. Don't confuse my epistemological approach with Bohr complementarity or Everett many worlds. Don't confuse. Here I have about the collapse. When we measure the particle, the collapse, the electromagnetic waves collapse into the particle. No, collapse is completely wrong, a completely wrong notion. In fact, when we measure the microparticle, we move from an epistemological to another epistemological. So we don't have a superposition of the Schrödinger cat, both alive and dead, and when we measure something, the other disappear, collapse, and we destroy the superposition, and from two states, we measure only one state and the other disappear. No, in fact, we have both states, but are in epistemological worlds, not in the same world. So it's completely, we have to interpret Schrödinger cat in a completely new framework. I don't repeat, it's the same thing about the quantum superposition. Effect is epistemological different worlds. So we can explain much better the non-locality and entanglement. We can explain much better. There is a correspondence between two particles and electromagnetic wave, and this is the explanation of entanglement and whatever you want. So I don't repeat. The hidden variables, non-locality, non-separability, these notions were introduced to say phenomena, but it was working in the wrong framework, the unicorn world. So these are empty concepts. Hidden variables, or I don't want to quote it, it's everything is about wrong concepts because the framework was wrong. Einstein, Podolsky, and Rosen concluded that quantum mechanics is incomplete description of reality, using creating their paradox. These two particles moving in two different directions, but their probability waves are strongly correlated. The measurement of a spin of the first particle, let's say upstate, that produces the collapse of the wave function, has an instantaneous effect on the spin of the second particle, let's say downstate. Under the Copenhagen interpretation, these instantaneous effects represent action at a distance or faster than light transmission, which according to Einstein's special theory of relativity is not possible. Einstein and his colleagues claimed that quantum mechanics would be incomplete because it does not take into account certain hidden variables of reality. Bell inequalities assume Einstein condition of locality as true. The experiment which involved the measurement of correlated photons, their polarization is detected, show that Bell's inequality is violated. The consequence of these experiments is that the system of those two particles has a non-locality property. Nobody understood that in fact, that non-locality is given by the fact that we have, in one world, we have two microparticles, the micro epistemological. In another world, in the same place, in another world, we have the electromagnetic wave, and there is an epistemological different world, and one world does not exist for the other. So the microparticle, those two microparticles, does not exist for electromagnetic wave, but we have the non-locality between those two particles because in other world there is an epistemological, there is an electromagnetic wave, and this is the non-locality explained without any problem, but not in unicorn world. We don't use collapse and hidden variables. We came with a completely new interpretation, and you have here exactly the paragraph explaining what I told you in the last words. It explains exactly what I told you just before this page. Parallel universe or multiverse. In order to avoid such kind of possibility, the proponents of multiverse introduced the notion of parallel universe. Deutsch believed that following Everett many worlds, Deutsch believes that the single particle interference experiments illustrate the multiverse, the parallel universe. Now, they didn't have any idea that there are epistemological worlds, and they believe in parallel universe. Nobody among them, Everett, Deutsch, and all the others, couldn't explain. They couldn't explain what does it mean parallel universe. They couldn't explain. They have no idea of explaining because they were working within the unicorn world. I came with a new concept, a new framework. No, there are not parallel universe. there are epistemological worlds. So this multiverse is completely wrong, because epistemological worlds are not multiverse, because one epistemological world does not exist for the other, all the other epistemological worlds. So it's not parallel. It's epistemological worlds. So it's something completely new. This is, we have to accept this. So many worlds or parallel worlds have to be rejected and replace it with something completely new. So I have again here a page with main ideas. I don't want to all have been explained by epistemological worlds. I have other approaches here, Strokey or Oritis, different ontologies, Penrose, the reductionist. I mentioned here David Hilbert's words, physics is becoming too difficult for physicists. Yes, it was a necessary philosopher, myself, to come and to explain, to discover and to explain all the mysteries of quantum mechanics. It was indeed, quantum mechanics, it was indeed imposing, but it was not the old one, it was not God who explained, it was in fact not God who is not playing dice. It is just there are epistemological worlds which one doesn't exist for the other. Feynman said that if you think you understand quantum mechanics, you don't understand quantum mechanics. Yes, he was right, because everything has been created within the unicorn world, and you could not understand quantum mechanics, any interpretation, because there were many interpretations. I presented only a few. So in fact, it was about epistemological phenomena, which belongs to epistemological worlds. So it is completely something new. There is nobody playing dice. There is not probability, not entanglement, not mysteries. Everything is rejected. And I believe Einstein said, quantum mechanics is very impressive, but an inner voice telling me that is not yet the real thing. I repeated his words. Yes, Einstein was right. It is all quantum mechanics interpretation are wrong interpretation, because their framework was the unicorn world, the universe, which does not exist. I believe that epistemological worlds will be the new framework of thinking for the next 300 years. Many people from physics, from great universities, from America, Germany, England, France, Romania, and other, Australia, and other countries plagiarize my ideas. They don't quote my idea. They don't quote my name, because what's happened? Those from my department here in Romania didn't promote me. Nobody promoted me here in Romania, and this was the reason that those from other countries could plagiarize my idea, because I was not promoted by my colleagues, because they hate me, so they couldn't promote me. So because of this, people, physicists, cognitive neuroscientists, and philosophers from other countries could plagiarize my ideas. And there were many in the last years who plagiarized my ideas, in the last 10 years, plagiarized my ideas. And it is, again, I repeat, it is like somebody composing a symphony quite very similar with the Fifth Symphony, Beethoven Fifth Symphony, and telling us that I have never listened to Fifth Symphony, Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. But his symphony is very, very similar with Beethoven's symphony. Who would believe his words? You have to be very, very stupid to believe his words. My epistemological words is a new paradigm. It's like creating a symphony, and nobody can tell me that I have the same ideas. I have the same ideas. The same ideas means a new framework of thinking. 100 years, the physicists have been working in a wrong framework. Nobody discovered this, my framework. I discovered my framework, and after I discovered, many people appears with the same ideas. But wait a moment, 100 years, nobody discovered epistemological worlds, and now, after I discovered and I published, appears hundreds of people with the same epistemological worlds. But nobody discovered before me. Why? They plagiarized my ideas. This is very simple. They plagiarized my idea, and this is what. So this is the end of my presentation. I expect now a question from people who wants to my presentation. Thank you very much for your
thank you, sir,
invitation.
for your wonderful presentation. And I think students have learned a lot of things about your new paradigm of thinking in physics. So we have got few questions. So how can you define uncertainty principle in your method?
To define what?
Uncertainty principle.
Uncertainty principle. Uncertainty principle is just the correspondence between microparticle from one epistemological world, and the correspondence between microparticle and the waves. But these two entities belong to epistemological worlds. They don't exist one for the other, and this is the reason that we need to introduce probabilities, because they don't exist one for the other. So we need indeed some uncertainty principle. We need indeed some probabilities, because we cannot measure directly both in the same, because they are not both in the same epistemological. So we need probabilities, but this is epistemological principle, not ontological as they thought until I appeared with epistemological thoughts. Uncertainty principle is an epistemological principle and not ontological as many people believe that until I appeared with the epistemological thoughts. It's an epistemological principle and not an ontological principle. This is what I claim with my epistemological thoughts, and this is the answer.
Okay, sir. Thank you. We have another question. So how can you define the dark matter and dark energy with this theory?
I was invited last year, 2020. I was invited by a physicist from Great Britain to write a paper. Me and my brother, I have a twin brother. We were together. That physicist from Great Britain invited me to write a paper about a chapter in his book. It was a book edited by him with the physicist. I was with my brother the only philosophers, and he told me, look, I want a chapter from you and your brother to be about dark matter or dark energy. You choose what you want. And I choose dark matter. And I explained dark matter because I had a book in 2016 about dark matter and dark energy. And I took from my book some main ideas, but the physicist from Great Britain furnished me some new papers about dark matter. I said, no, look, in the last 3 years appeared different papers about dark matter. Read these papers and rewrite your theory. And of course, I did this. I read that papers and I rewrote my theory. But my theory was the same. It was the same that dark matter doesn't exist something in macro epistemological where is the planets are, and the planets have a galaxy moves all. I explained this considering that the galaxy, which does not exist in the macro world, what exists in the macro world are just the planets. But in an epistemological different world, that is macro epistemological world, the galaxy represent entities, and this is exactly how I rotated something in the macro world. I rotating a disk. If I rotated, it is exactly like rotating. I want a disk here. It is exactly like rotating a macro object in an epistemological world, the macro epistemological world. So this is the reason that is galaxy moves like dark matter. And in the same way, I explain dark energy. The energy, the speed of all entities is increasing because there is a correspondence with the phenomena from a macro epistemological world. But in my book, written with my brother, published in December 2020, last year, I came with a new interpretation of dark energy. We can explain the dark energy only checking for the correspondence between macro, micro, and waves, electromagnetic waves. And I showed that because of this correspondence, there is a dark energy. Because of this correspondence is dark energy. And I explain in my book in December dark energy without using macro epistemological world. But anyway, macro epistemological world exists for explaining dark energy, dark matter. So this is my explanation regarding both.
Yeah, thank you, sir. We have another question that is theoretical physics and philosophical physics same, or it is completely different?
it is a mixture between physics and philosophy, because in order to find the answer to the mysteries of quantum mechanics, I needed to know quantum mechanics, not mathematics, just from a philosophical viewpoint. I read books written by physicists, but without mathematics, popular books, and it was for me enough to understand quantum mystery and to apply my epistemological approach to quantum mysteries. It was enough, because I believe nature does not know mathematics. I followed Einstein slogan: when you refer to reality, mathematics is not sure. When it's sure, it does not refer to reality, and I'm sure about this. My epistemological words have no idea about mathematics, so I could explain. I could understand the quantum mysteries without mathematics. And I am a philosopher. I read physics and I explain physics, but I explain I solved the great problems in philosophy, and then I moved to quantum mechanics, and then to cognitive neuroscience. So I moved from one to the other science, and in philosophy, I've been working in philosophy all the time, and I am a philosopher working from a philosophical viewpoint in these sciences, because a philosopher has to work in science, not only philosophy. And I have never worked in ethics. I don't care about ethics. So don't tell me about ethics, because I know nothing about ethics.
Okay, so thank you. This may be the last question. So, how can you define Big Bang using your theory?
Yes, there was not a Big Bang. There were many Big Bangs at the same time. Many Big Bangs. I don't need good inflations. I reject good inflations. It appears before the Big Bangs there was an epistemological world than what appears after. So from that epistemological world, which maybe it exists even now, from that some phenomena happened, and because of those phenomena, in our universe appears some phenomena in different places, and from those phenomena there were electromagnetic waves. From those electromagnetic waves appeared later microparticles in an epistemological world, and much later appeared macro epistemological world in an epistemological world, but in relation with the microparticle from epistemological worlds. So we have epistemological worlds related, but not that one does not exist for the other. So we have to exclude the causality between micro epistemological world, macro epistemological world, electromagnetic field epistemological world. We have to exclude causality between these, because we have only correspondences, and correspondences do not have ontology. So it is very important, exclude causality between one world and the other world. Exclude causality between microparticles and macroparticles. There is no causality. There are only correspondences. This is very important. So this is my explanation for the what I emphasize again. It is a completely new paradigm, completely different than Bohr complementarity, Everett many worlds, and Feynman particle moves to both sides. No, it's completely different. They constructed all their theory. They constructed within the unicorn world. I came with a new approach, constructed in a new framework, epistemological world, and I found these epistemological worlds working on the mind-body problem. There is a physicist, I don't give name, there is a physicist who published a very small book after my book appeared at Springer. My book appeared at Springer in 2015, but on the cover is written 2016, because in 2015 at Springer appeared somebody from Netherlands with all my ideas in his book. And I gave the book to Springer in 2014. So you can imagine what happened. I don't want to say what happened, but you can imagine what's happened. That guy from Netherlands published in 2015 a book at Springer with all my ideas. unbelievably similar to ideas. And my book appeared, I made a pressure, and my book appeared in 2015, in October 2015, pressure and my editor pressures. But on the cover is written 2016. to show the difference between me. Hey, those from Springer. I have my PhD thesis published in 2007. I have papers published in America in 2005. So it doesn't matter that that guy from Netherlands published in 2015, because my ideas were already posted by me in my first 5 books, posted already on different sites, free, and all in English. So their movement between me and the Netherlands was useless, because I published in 2005 and 2007 and 2008 and 2010, and so it was useless for those from Springer. So
Okay,
thank
that's
you.
okay. Yeah, we have another question. So there were other universe before the Big Bang. What is your view of Penrose? Is this contradicts present theories?
No. I said this. I don't know when Penrose said this, that before our world there was another world, but there were other people, persons who believed this. Before our universe there was another universe. There are other physicists, Penrose and others, who believe this. So I don't accuse them of plagiarism. No, because my idea is different than this. In before our epistemological different worlds, because there are many epistemological different worlds here. Before these epistemological different worlds, there were other epistemological different worlds, and maybe those epistemological different worlds, maybe they are still here, but we cannot see them because one world does not exist for the other. So I'm sure it was many epistemological different worlds. It was many different epistemological different worlds in the past, and it was different chains of epistemological different worlds, chains, relationship between correspondence, not other relationship. There were different chains of epistemological different worlds, and do we go at the infinity in the back? No. Following Aristotle, a philosopher, we have to stop. We cannot put an infinity numbers of epistemological different worlds which corresponded one with the other. No, we have to put stop, as following Aristotle. Aristotle said, no, we cannot accept in back of us an infinity time, because if there is an infinite time, this discussion would be in the past, because infinity processes cover every processes, including this discussion. So because this discussion is not in the past, we have to put a stop and to insert a prime motor. He said, Aristotle, a prime motor who was unmoved, which created the motion. For me, it's not a prime motor which created. It is in my future book that I finished just a few days ago. I want to publish to a good publishing company. I write that, but in my book from last year, it's written already. It is nothing but is hyper nothing, not nothing. It's hyper nothing, which is the first epistemological world, and that hyper nothing is not an epistemological world. Similarly with micro, macro, and your mind, which is an epistemological world. It's completely different than the others. Exactly following Aristotle, I have to stop the regress ad infinitum is the name. I want to stop the regress ad infinitum, inserting the first epistemological world. It is EW0, and this is the first. It is exactly like Platon, unmoved mover, but is completely different than Aristotle concept. It's a completely new concept. But I needed to stop with the regress ad infinitum. So don't believe in back of us is an infinite time. No, it's not infinite. It's not possible to be an infinite time. Aristotle showed us.
Yeah, thank you, sir, for your wonderful presentation and discussion session, sir. So we'd like to say thanks on the behalf of the Department of Physics, Pabna University of Science and Technology, for accepting our invitation, sir. So it was a great webinar with you, sir, and I think the students have learned a lot of things about your new paradigm of thinking in physics. So thanks again. Bye for today.
I have to thank, well, Pratham, I have to thank you because you are from physics and you invited me to present to your, and only physicists are here invited. I am a philosopher. I have to thank you. But I suggest to your students to learn my presentation, my episode, in order to translate all the principles and the laws from the past to translate in my epistemology fluence, because I have so many people who plagiarize my ideas from physics, from America, from Germany, from England, from France, from Romania. So many plagiarize my ideas that they understood that I came with a new framework and they understood that is correct framework. So many people plagiarize my ideas. What I can do? Nobody wants to recognize that I came with these ideas. Why? Because I'm from Romania. And Romania is too small country, is the most corrupted. And my colleagues didn't promote me. Because of this, they could plagiarize my idea. Because my colleagues didn't promote me. Oh my God, when I tell you about my colleagues, oh my God, they would like to kill me. I'm lucky the guy, I made karate in the past, so oh my God. So I don't want to tell more.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your help.
Yeah, you are
Thank you
most
very
welcome.
much.
Bye
Thank you
for
very
today.
much. Thank you.
Have a nice day, sir.